So thank you for joining today. My name is Jason. I'll be covering the slides in today's presentation on how to secure our OT networks using Cisco Cyber Vision. My co-presenter is Garrett, and he'll be covering the lab or demo portion of today. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. For those who might not know us, LA Networks has been in business for over 25 years. We're headquartered, as the name kind of implies, right here in Los Angeles. That being said, we're used to working on both a national and a global scale. So if you're in LA, that's great. Let's meet some point. We run a Cisco user group, for example. You're welcome to come to one of those. Or if you have a need to get an engineer on site right away, we can do that. If you're not in the LA area, that's fine. We don't have a problem getting on a plane if needed, or just being able to do things through tools like WebEx, etc. We're definitely an engineering first organization. Most of our employees are engineers. Many of them are CCAEs or CCAEs in training. And most of our engagements are actually with repeat customers or referrals from those repeat customers, right? So our motto is kind of the best way to get the next project is to deliver on the current project. And we try to take that to heart. And that's just part of our engineering culture. So let's talk a little bit about the challenge. I would expect probably many of you are IT workers. I've definitely been in IT for close to 30 years now. And that being said, I have had exposure on the OT, particularly in medical environments, for over a decade at this point. I wouldn't call myself an OT specialist per se. I'm not getting down onto the PLCs or the SCADA devices, but I am very familiar with having to support both types of networks, as is Garrett. So let's talk about some of these differences, right? In IT, we're used to having security be kind of our top-notch contender for our attention. In OT, uptime is the top-notch contender. If in IT, if I have a critical vulnerability, I just push out the patch to everyone, and I expect them to be able to patch and reboot right away. That's a non-starter when it comes to OT, right? You can't just take things down, patch them, reboot them, whatever. Uptime is king in OT. That does not mean that security isn't critical, but it does take a backseat due to the criticality of uptime, right? Regulatory requirements can kind of further complicate that landscape. They may mandate what is allowed from an uptime, downtime perspective, or you may have a reporting requirement if you do take downtime or something like that. Another challenge that we have is lack of visibility. In IT, we're very much used to being able to have our tools, have them go out, discover things, push policies, etc. And so you may find that you can't do that in an OT network, right? You have to consider that there are different protocols running over there. It may not be an IP Ethernet environment. You may be running things like Modbus or Profinet or S7 or something else. You also might find these aren't, Windows and Macintosh laptops, etc. They might be traffic lights or temperature sensors or microscopes, right? They don't have a traditional OS on them. I have been in environments where doing things like active discoveries, like a port scan or a ping sweep or something, takes PLCs and just knocks them off the network, again, causing downtime. That's the thing we're most trying to avoid. So all of these lead to a challenge with bridging between OT and IT. That's where LA Networks can kind of help in your journey. We can help kind of be your Rosetta Stone to kind of bridge these two groups. We're used to working with both IT and OT. So how does cyber vision fit into this, right? Well, the first thing is visibility. I mentioned that you may not be running what I would call quote unquote normal assets. You might have things like temperature sensors, or you might have things like uh, production lines or mining equipment, et cetera, right? You need something that can understand that. They can understand what a PLC is, for example. They can understand protocols like that. They can understand Modbus or Profinet. And CyberVision does. It was built from the ground up to be a manufacturing insight tool, right? Next is your security posture. You need something that can report on security within context of the visibility you have. Is this a critical or a non-critical piece of equipment or process or gear, right? How do I triage those different risks? I need to have some kind of methodology for doing that. And then operational insights. I want a dashboard that helps both OT and IT at the same time. And I want something that has an API that can integrate with my other existing tools. And Cyber Vision does deliver on all of these. It is aware of those assets. It does have a risk ranking scheme that we'll go through, and it does have a dashboard for both IT and OT. I had a question in the Q&A about, is this just for OT? It's actually for both IT or OT. And we will go through kind of how those roles break down in some of these tools, just so you know. So let's look at the solution from like a 30,000 foot view, right? The first thing you're going to want to do is probably build some kind of border between your IT infrastructure and your OT infrastructure. This is because, as I mentioned, we do a lot of active scanning and active traffic manipulation on IT. We do not want that crossing the boundary into OT where it might cause downtime, right? We want to keep a border between those two. Almost always, we pretty much see that done with a firewall. And then once we have that boundary set up, we'll deploy our Cisco Cyber Vision product, right? It's going to leverage the network as a sensor, and we're going to talk more about what network as a sensor means on the next slide. And this means it's behind that firewall, so I don't need to open up a bunch of firewall rules or anything like that. And I start gaining my visibility. Remember that it's going to be already aware of things like Modbus or Profinet, PLCs, et cetera. And it's going to take all that into consideration. So you've got something that is IoT sensitive day one. And then the third phase, which might be optional, depends a little bit on your network and your needs. But if you would like to break down your manufacturing cells into different segments, you can leverage something like ICE, which actually ties directly into CyberVision. I pick on Cisco ICE because it's got a very clean, nice integration with CyberVision, but you can use other products to tie into CyberVision as well. You could forward events over to Splunk, for example. All sorts of tools might integrate. It's more like there's a third phase to take some of your IT tools and integrate them with or inform them from the cyber vision solution. So what do I mean by network as a sensor? Normally, when we're securing these kinds of networks, we have to put in things like optical taps and span sessions, etc., which adds a lot of complexity and requires out-of-band connections and makes firewalls maybe difficult. We don't have any of that in CyberVision typically. Typically, our network devices, our switches, our routers, etc., are going to run as our sensors, right? And this is nice because we're not worrying about just managing these switches. In fact, that's our afterthought. Our forethought is the devices connected to those switches and being aware of the roles of those devices. Where do they sit within my Purdue model, for example? How critical is this particular PLC or something like that? And that's exactly where CyberVision sits. It's important to know that when we're leveraging the network as a sensor, we're not just sending all of our traffic over to the Cyber Vision center, sorry. We're only sending the metadata. So think about 3, 4, 5% of your total traffic. That's all that's going into Cyber Vision. I had a question on where is this sit, because I mentioned behind the firewall. The sensors are always behind the firewall. The Cyber Vision Center could be either an on-prem solution or a cloud solution, just depending on your preferences. It works either way. Obviously, if it's in the cloud, it's on the other side of the firewall. If it's a physical deployment, then you could deploy it behind or in front of the firewall, either direction. Good question. I'm not going to read through all this, but this is what I mean by network as a sensor. And the big takeaway is you can deploy network as a sensor as long as you can support app hosting in a virtualized environment, right? Basically, if you could run a network container on the device, the switch, the router, etc., then you're good to deploy network as a sensor. Now, you might ask, well, what if I don't? What if this is going into a brownfield where maybe some of it does support that, like there may be IE 3400s, but some of it does not? That's okay, but then we're out of network as a sensor mode and we're into hardware sensor. That's that last item, the IC 3000. And then we are going to do span ports, right? We're going to basically span all of our traffic over to the IC 3000 device. It'll do the edge compute to send the metadata up to the Cyber Vision center, right? So we support either. Definitely the cleaner way to go is network as a sensor if you can. If you can't, then we're going to be looking at span ports and IC 3000 compute edges. This is that workflow I mentioned, right? And we're going to break this down by where does OT fit and where does IT fit. The first item you're going to do is you're going to be checking the inventory. This is largely an OT task, but it's good to involve IT so that they at least have awareness and context. But you're going to do this because as an OT operator, you're going to understand what your manufacturing process looks like. I say manufacturing, it'd be the same for mining or for transportation, shipping, etc. Right? I just use manufacturing as a generic IoT type terminology here. And so we start with the inventory, then we move into the customized views. This is very much an OT object. You're going to be creating your groups. You're going to be setting tags. You're going to be looking at your presets. We're going to go through all of these steps in the demo with Garrett in a few minutes. Then it's going to come down to starting to triage our problems, creating risk scores, and leveraging tags to identify how critical that risk is. This is a shared IT/OT responsibility, right? We want to be able to leverage some of our skill sets and expertise on the IT side of things to help inform and contain these problems on the OT side of things. This is a shared model. Same thing with the next one, monitor and protect. We're going to do things like build out our baselines and then set up our alerts when we see anomalies or threats based on those baselines. And remember, this isn't just talking about your network switches or your network routers. It's really talking about those endpoints that are connected to those switches or routers, right? Now we'll talk a little bit about, oh, I had a question that I missed earlier. What if my switch is not one of those ones supported on that slide that had the switches? That's okay. Like I said, if it supports containerization, if I could put a network container on there, then you could probably get at least a roadmap timeline. That list does change. We can work with you and Cisco if you have a particular model that you're looking for. If it doesn't, let's say like the Catalyst 9500, that just does not currently support the ability to do a network container, then we would be down to the span solution with the IC3000. Sorry, I missed that earlier. Thank you. Asset discovery, right? So this is that first section where we're going through the inventory. And what are we really looking at, right? Well, there's two types of discovery, passive and active. Now, at LA Networks, we would normally recommend passive, and passive is indeed the default. Well, you might wonder why. Why would I want to do a passive discovery? It doesn't sound like it's as thorough as active, and it's not as thorough as an active discovery. But remember, what is the most critical item when it comes to the IoT space or the non-carpeted space? It's uptime. And an active discovery, and I have seen it happen with my own eyes, an active discovery, depending on how it's done or what devices are connected and how they react to things, could cause disruptions. And we never want to do that. So we typically see people doing passive. That's the default. And it leads to no risk of disruption because it's passive, right? It means there are no ARP floods, right? Cyber Vision isn't going to scan your network when it's in passive mode. When you do use active discovery, it is nice to know that the active discovery is done at the edge from the sensor. And so that means I don't need a bunch of firewall rules or net rules set up to allow my scanner in if you did want to do active discovery. And remember, whether it's active or it's passive, Cyber Vision will be protocol aware, right? So that's an important differentiator. Let's talk a little bit about risk scores because this is the other critical thing. The risk score in Cyber Vision is an impact multiplied by a likelihood, and then it's normalized on a scale from 0 to 100. And then we're going to color code these green, orange, and red to line up with the risk level of low, medium, or high, right? So the impact is just how critical is this device? If this device were to be compromised, how critical is it, right? This is based on tags, which Garrett will show us in a moment. And then the likelihood is just how likely is this vulnerability to be impactful to me? Do I have the right service running? If I don't, I'm not as likely to be impacted. So I'll lower my risk score, right? With that being said, we're going to move into the demo, and I'll turn this over to my co-presenter, Garrett.
Thank you, Jason.
Mm-hmm.
So in this demo, we're going to go through Cisco Cyber Vision. This demo is based on Cyber Vision 4.1. And what we're looking at here is the main Cyber Vision dashboard. And this just kind of provides us with a quick view into the system activity, and it consists of two parts, the operational overview and the security overview. So on the operational overview, we can see the protocol distribution, the 10 most critical events, as well as our preset highlights and the associated risk score, devices, and vulnerabilities. In the security overview, that shows us kind of our vulnerable devices, devices by risk score, our most critical events, and events by category, and again, preset highlights. On the left-hand side, I kind of have my navigation, and then at the top, I also have navigation that will kind of progress as we move throughout this demo. The first section that we're going to look at is the Explore section. So this will show us kind of a list of all of the presets within the system. And a preset is just a set of filters to look at only the information that a user is concerned with. So this could be used to filter only a specific device type or devices in a specific area. There's two types of presets. So there's system presets, which are pre-populated by the system, and then custom presets, which are user created. All the custom presets are on the My Preset section. We're going to look at the manufacturing section here, and this will kind of just show us a dashboard view of that preset. So this shows us the global risk score, any vulnerabilities associated with that preset, the devices in this preset, activities, and the events variables, and if credentials are seen. At the top, I have the ability to adjust my time window, so that can be good to kind of go back in time and kind of see what this preset looked like at a particular point in time. So at the bottom, I also have this section called tags. So there's two types of tags, device tags and activity tags. And tags are an important component to Cyber Vision, as they're used to describe a network. Device tags are applied to the devices themselves, and they describe the functions of the device or the component. The device tags are generated at the component level, whereas activity tags are assigned to activities and describe protocols used and are correlated to its properties. So activity tags are always generated at the flow level. Multiple tags can be applied to a single device or an activity. And again, they're just a method to kind of simplify the information that you see within Cyber Vision about a device or an activity. Cyber Vision automatically applies tags. They're not necessarily modifiable here in the GUI, but you can create your own tags and rules using the RESTful API. The next section that we'll look at is the map view for this preset. And what I'm seeing here is all the devices associated with this preset. And if a device is grouped together, they're shown in this colored box, and any activity between the devices is shown in the form of lines and arrows. And this legend on the left-hand side kind of shows me the color-coded related to the activity between the devices. So this allows us to kind of see visually how the devices are communicating and what type of traffic they're sending. This information can be exported to a PDF, and it's kind of important to know that this is a logical view of how the devices are communicating. This is not necessarily a physical or topology view. Within this view, I can also see kind of quickly vulnerabilities that are associated with the devices, and information about the devices. So that vulnerability count is shown as this red circle on the right-hand corner. And if I click on this and I click on any component, it's going to open up a window on the right-hand side and show me more information about that particular component. So IP address, any associated tags, properties related to the device, as well as activities, vulnerabilities, and events and credentials if they're seen. So if I click on this icon in the middle, it will open up the technical sheet. This will show me kind of like the basic properties for the device. So IP address, what version of firmware it's seen, what kind of vendor device it is on the network, as well as any kind of additional information on the components, when it was first seen, and any tags. Next, we'll look at the risk score. So this is what Jason was just talking about. So the risk score is defined as the risk equals the likelihood times the impact. So the likelihood is what is the likelihood of the device being compromised, and the impact is what is the device and how critical is it. So we can see here that this device has a current risk score of 55 and an achievable risk score of 16. And on the right-hand side, we can see kind of the details, or the additional details that kind of Cyber Vision used to create that risk score. The next section that we'll look at is the vulnerability section. So these are all the vulnerabilities that are seen and associated with this device. The name of the vulnerability, a description of the vulnerability, as well as any solution or links associated with that vulnerability. The next section that we'll look at is the automation tab. On the automation tab, we can see what variables or memory pointers inside the device are being accessed and how. So in this case, it's the Siemens device using an addressing scheme of M300, and the data type is being read. And we can also see what device is accessing that data point and when and first last access occurred. So this screen can quickly identify an application layer, what information is being accessed, and by what process. On the activity tab, I kind of see like a focused mini map of this drilling station and the communication that's occurring between it. So we see a Dell device and a Siemens device communicating to this drilling station. And at the bottom, I can see those specific activities along with the tags associated. If I click on any of those, I can get more information on the right, specifically about that activity. And I can also go into the flows section here and see more information about what components are communicating and the ports and protocols and when that activity first and last occurred, along with associated tags with these flows. So going back to the main map view, like I said before, this is kind of an aggregate view of the connections. If I want to show everything, I can click on the show network activities, and this can kind of give me an easier way to see what devices are communicating with what devices. So,
Hey, Garrett,
yes, sir.
we had a quick question. Someone had asked that they noticed that there was an X at the bottom of the screen. They were asking, does this integrate with Secure X or Cisco XDR, and does it integrate with any other products?
Yes, it does. The X you do see is integration with Secure X, which has now announced end of life. So going forward, it will probably be integrated with like a Splunk or XDR. It also integrates with Cisco ICE. That's a good question.
Thank you.
Um, so like I was saying before, if we want to like quickly investigate communication that's occurring within the preset, I can actually click on any of these flows and get information about what's happening between the devices. So this is communication between a VMware device and a Rockwell device, and it's getting tagged, and CyberVision is assigning the tags of unestablished, insecure, and potential port scan activity. So this just gives us an easy way to kind of visually see traffic that should be potentially investigated. Um, Switching now from the top menu, I'm going to look at the device list for this preset. So the device list is just kind of showing me all the devices that are associated with this preset in kind of a summarized table view. Again, I can click on any of these devices and see the information on the specific device. And I can also export this information to a CSV for like reporting. The next section I'm going to look at is the activities list. So this is similar to like what we saw before. This is all the activities between the devices within the preset. It's going to show me kind of a summarized view of the activity, including the IP address, I'm sorry, the device names, the first and the last time the activity's been seen, and any activity that's associated with it. Again, I can click on any of these and I can see kind of more information and then investigate those flows. Moving on to vulnerabilities, this will show me a vulnerabilities dashboard for this manufacturing preset. At the top here is the 10 most matched vulnerabilities, along with the links to the CVE to get more information. And I can also just click on the affected devices and see a list of all the affected devices for this vulnerability on the right-hand side. The Security Insights tab gives me 4 different headings. So this will show me DNS requests, HTTP requests, web requests, SMB, and flows with no tag. So this will show me the top requests for each category, as well as the requests, the 5 least requests, rare events for each category, as well as all the different DNS requests that have been made in the environment. And that's the same for the web requests, SMB paths, and then any flows that are not tagged by CyberVision for whatever reason are shown here as well. The last section that we're going to look at is the Purdue model. So the Purdue model, so what CyberVision tries to do is place the devices on a specific level of the Purdue model based on the tags that it's gathered and the information that it's gathered about the device. So the Purdue model is pretty well established in industrial networking, and this is just a view that CyberVision tries to generate automatically. So that about wraps up the preset view. The next section that we'll look at is reports. So there's 4 types of reports in CyberVision: an inventory report, an activity report, and a vulnerability report, and a PLC report. So if I click on any of these reports, I can choose to generate a report for a specific time range, or I can choose to view an activity, or I'm sorry, view a report that was previously generated and view that anytime. The next section that we'll look at is the event section. This is going to show me critical, high, and medium and low events that Cyber Vision has seen. So I'm going to change my time period to a year. And I'm going to see I have critical, high, medium, low events that have been seen by Cyber Vision. And at the bottom of the screen, it'll show me how these events have kind of progressed through the year. If I click on any of these, it'll change my view to a calendar view. And this will kind of show me chronologically how those events have progressed, have basically progressed. If I clear this out, you can see I can actually search based on MAC address, IP address, component, and other factors, and get information specifically to what I want. I can also see just kind of chronologically how events are occurring within my network. The last section that we're going to look at is the monitor section. So the monitor section is actually really cool. So the monitor section in Cyber Vision gives you the ability to detect changes inside your industrial network. It does this by creating baselines based off of your presets. So when you create a baseline, Cyber Vision is going to say that is known good configuration, and then Cyber Vision can detect and track any changes that happen to the baseline. So what we'll see here is all the components within this baseline, and we'll see here like this test ECO1 is being identified as a new component. And it's going to show, if I click on that, it's going to show me the tags that are associated when this device was first seen, and also any information on the device. So if I click on the IP address, it'll show me kind of the new component details. This will show me that it's a Dell computer, its IP address, all the information associated with the device, as well as any tags that Cyber Vision has found about this device. If I click on new activities, this will again, activities are essentially flows. So if I click on activities, this is new communication between devices. So if we click on this Windows 7 and test DCO1 flow, this will show me information about this flow. And if I click on the tags, it'll kind of show me the traffic that Cyber Vision is seeing between these two devices. I can also choose to investigate with flows, and I can just see more information about the components, the ports that it's using, and the protocols that it's using, as well as when that activity is occurring. The last view that we're going to look at is the map view for the baseline. So the map view just gives you a visual way to kind of see things as they're changing in your environment. So anything that's part of your baseline and unchanged is going to be shown as a gray line. Any new changes are solid red, and any new communication is solid red, and any changed events are going to be this dashed line here at the bottom. So that about wraps up my part of the demo, Jason. I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. I'm just going through to see if I got any more questions. I had a few that were kind of answered in the flow of things. One thing I did want to point out, there were a couple of questions. We've had several questions on like the different platforms and so forth. One thing that came up was, does this need to run on every switch, or can I just put it like on like a distribution or aggregation pair of switches? You typically would want to run this on every switch. That's because a lot of this traffic is going to be east to west. We're going to build out a cell for a section of our plant, and it's going to be fairly self-contained. Most of the traffic may not go up to a distribution or aggregation point. So it can vary depending on your environment, but you typically want to run a solution like this on every edge switch that is going to have IoT type devices connected to that switch, right? So typically that's where you're going to put it. In fact, if you end up doing something like a CAT 9500, you couldn't even run it at the aggregation or distribution pair, or you may not even have an aggregation or distribution. It just depends on your network and how it's set up and how large it is. As I mentioned, we can always go through those things. Our contact information is in the chat. I think that about wraps it up. I'm just going through to see if there's any last questions. I don't see any. Okay. I want to thank everyone for their time. If you do have questions, please reach out. And I think I said 35 to 40 minutes, and we came in right around 35 minutes. So I was good to my word. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Need help? Call our cybersecurity team and book a consultation with us today.